My twin sister Janessa was murdered at age 16. I witnessed it like a coward from atop the tree in a forest where it happened. I had actually blacked out the memory for a while. I knew that she was dead, but I couldn't remember how it happened. It wasn't until I tried therapy that it slowly came back to me. I was also reminded of how much my parents used to fight. Our family was planning a camping trip the day before my sister's death. Before leaving, my parents erupted into another huge fight. Janessa and I had been looking forward to the trip, and once again, our parents' awful communication skills was ruining it before it even began. We snuck out of the house and took a lift to the forest. We left our phones at home, not caring whether our parents would be worried sick. We enjoyed ourselves the first day. I set up our tent, made a fire, had s'mores, and I did all that stuff one typically associates with camping. The next morning, everything changed. I woke up alone in our tent. Outside, I heard my sister talking to someone, inquisitive. I opened the tent and I saw somebody sitting at our now unlit campfire who looked just like me. The figure transformed as soon as Janessa realized that it wasn't me. Together we ran off, that thing rushing after us with heavy steps. I was faster than my sister and a bit more athletic. I grabbed onto a tree branch and I climbed up the tree. Janessa was not so lucky. I watched it happen. I watched that thing tear my sister to pieces. I'm still haunted by her screams. I also understand now why she always appears badly mutilated in my nightmares. I stayed up in that tree overnight, my sister's corpse lying in the leaves, her remaining eye always staring up at me. While in therapy, there was a moment when I suddenly recalled the hallucination I had the morning after my sister's death. I thought that I saw her corpse climb at the tree where I hid. She wanted me to come down and join her. It caused me to panic and cry out. A couple of men who had been camping in the area heard my screams and at last I was rescued. My parents don't argue anymore. I hardly see them at all anymore since my sister's death. We're an upper middle class family, and over the last couple of years my parents have frequently gone on vacations. They don't tell me where and I never ask. I usually just wake up and I find out that they've left yet again. I'm out of high school now and I have no career path yet. I've only really had one thing on my mind since I remember what killed Janessa. And now I'm returning to the forest where she had died. And I'm going to go after the thing that had killed her. I've been preparing for this. And if it is a Wendigo like I've suspected, then I'm more than ready to take my revenge. And this is how I'm doing it. I took a lift again. Had the driver known what I was carrying in my bags, I doubt they would have let me in. As I sat there, the realization of what I was doing grew heavily on me. What the hell am I doing? I've been talking myself up for the past couple of years. As much as I want a glorious victory, the closer I've come to this day, the more I daydream about dying the same way that Janessa did. As angry as I am with my parents, I don't think they deserve to lose their only remaining child. But I just can't move on knowing that that thing is still out there. My legs were as dense as gold once I tried to exit the cab. The driver watched awkwardly as I struggled to pull myself out while pulling on my backpack and working to carry the other supplies. Why was I doing this alone? I don't want anyone else getting hurt in this. I think it was my reasoning. But God, I wish I wasn't out here doing this alone. With each step that I took into the forest, the more the terror numbed. I was in the domain of the Wendigo now. I wasn't entirely sure how much of the information about them was real. I knew that they could change their appearance. I know that their true form is just like the drawings people have made. There's no way to be an expert on these things unless you've actually dealt with one. And I'm still not sure why it decided not to come after me. Based on its size, I doubt it would have had any difficulty. Instead, I'm still alive and crazy enough to come back and pick a fight with it. As I set up camp, I found myself jumping at the sound of any bird call or movement from a nearby animal. The way I hammered in my tent, I knew I was calling attention to myself. In my left pants pocket was a gun. Like werewolves, I had heard that silver bullets were necessary to kill Wendigos. And what if I'm wrong? The thought had been with me ever since I stepped foot back into these woods. I stopped frequently while setting up. Behind the nearby tree, I was almost certain I could see somebody watching me and then hiding behind it again. I didn't bother to walk over and check it out. I finished up my tent and I made up my sleeping bag inside. As I did this, I heard calls that sounded almost human off in the distance. It probably knew that I was here. The minutes went by slowly, but soon dusk set upon the forest. I built a fire like the one Janessa and I had made. I roasted 2 marshmallows. Despite her absence, I made her a s'more for her as well, resting it on a sizable rock near the fire. As I ate it, I thought about our last night together. All things considered, it was pleasant. Being twins, we had moments where we had gotten into arguments like our parents. We had fought one another. We had our problems. But that night, it was pleasant. I had actually been glad that we had decided to camp without our parents. As frightened as I still was, I felt a warmth not from the fire. A sense of calm overcame me as my memories were suddenly flooded with the good times Janessa and I had had. The good times were not for long though. I could hear footsteps not far behind me. Jeremy. I could never forget that voice. It sounded just like Janessa, but I knew that it wasn't her. For some reason, I felt compelled to sit there calmly. As it approached, I could tell that it was going over to take the seat at the rock where I had left the s'more. I glanced delicately to my right. I watched as a figure that looked almost identical to the one Janessa and I remembered picked up the s'more and took a bite. "That's not yours." I surprised myself blurting that out. The fake Janessa ignored me, continuing to scarf it down. The terror turned to anger. The thing responsible for my sister's death was now standing right next to me, mocking my grief. I didn't wait for it to finish. I pulled out my gun and I pointed it directly at the figure. Before I could fire, the creature jumped to the left and turned around. I was stuck with paralysis when I saw the mutilated face of my sister's corpse staring back at me. I'm trapped, Jeremy. I struggled to keep aim. How dare that thing pretend to be her? It won't let me go, and it won't let you go either. We can be together again. It's so much nicer than going home to an empty house and unloving parents. She held her hand out to me. Trust me, brother. Please. My trigger finger felt as though struck with a serious case of arthritis. Janessa took a step towards me. Wait, no. It's not Janessa. Why did I write that? Feed the forest with me, Jeremy. It's so much better being dead. Prove it. At last, I pulled the trigger. The creature hollered in pain as it fell to the ground. I had hit a lung, which wouldn't be enough. I aimed the gun at its heart, but I failed to pull the trigger as it rolled over and jumped back to its feet. Within seconds, it had transformed from a corpse of my sister to its massive, dark, skeletal form. My mind was caught between fight or flight. I stood there aiming my gun, but desperately wanted to flee. As it rushed towards me, I chose the latter option. I rushed over to the bag that I had left near the tent. Inside was a weapon that I had built myself. As I rushed over, I could tell that I wasn't going to be able to outrun it. I fired another shot. The bullet lodged itself inside the neck of the beast. It cried out once more, buying me a bit of time to get to the bag. Why did I have it zipped up? As I tried to open it, the Wendigo rushed towards me again. Just like on the day of Janessa's death, I ran from the campsite further into the forest. History was repeating itself. I was going to fail to avenge my sister. My parents were going to lose their last remaining child, all because I could not let this go. After at least several minutes, I had somehow managed to keep outrunning it. I refused to slow down and look over my shoulder. As I kept running, I noticed that I had gone in some sort of circle. Up ahead of me was the campsite again. I had a chance to grab the bag and I pulled out the weapon. The closer I came to the campsite, the louder the Wendigo's footsteps became. I could almost feel the wind as the creature tried to claw at me. Once I reached the campsite, I put my hand out, clutching the bag. It felt like almost too great a risk to put my gun back in my pocket, but I needed it free to pull out the weapon. I managed to do just that, and I used my left hand to pull out a long metal spike. I had built it in such a way to have the spike shoot out at the push of a button. The Wendigo wasn't going to slow down until it had me. I had no choice. I had to turn around and I had to have perfect timing. I had to collect my debt from the creature that took my twin sister. Chew on this, you son of a bitch. I turned around, pressing the button that shot the spike out. Less than a foot from the face of the Wendigo. It cried so loud my ears hurt and began to ring. I had done it. The spike had pierced the heart. Silver. Weakly, the Wendigo tried to swipe at me, but somehow lacked the strength. The next part was a gamble. I pulled out my gun and I shot it in the head. It wasn't going to be enough to end the Wendigo, assuming what I had read up was correct. I rushed back over to where I had dropped my bag. Inside was a silver axe that I had also designed myself. When I returned, the creature was still conscious, letting out continuous agonizing cries. I felt no sympathy. I hacked away at its wrists first. Its claws were the biggest threat and I wanted them gone. Despite the weightlifting that I had been doing, it took over a dozen hacks to remove the first long-fingered hand. I pulled out my gun and I shot it in the head again. It subdued the creature long enough for me to remove the second hand, and then I began on its head. As it began waking up again, I found myself screaming at the creature. I demanded that it stay dead, calling it every insulting name that came to mind. Once I had hacked most of the way through its head, I pulled it off, and I kicked it a couple of feet away. The Wendigo no longer moved. It took over an hour, but I had managed to put each limb, the head, and torso in the trash bags that I had brought along. One by one, I carried them back to the campsite. I lit another fire, burning each bag. It took until dawn for me to burn the body. I left the torso for last. It was a struggle, but I managed to remove the heart, rip it to pieces, and place it in a silver box. After locking it, I looked around the site and I decided to leave everything except my gun in the box behind. I was never particularly religious, but in the months leading up to my fight, I had gotten to know a priest at the church in my area called St. Alphonsus. Luckily for me, he was there when I arrived with the silver box. His face went several shades paler when I showed it to him. Nevertheless, he escorted me to the back of the church with a pair of shovels and helped me bury it. Once done, I sat there, suddenly flooded with overwhelming emotions. I did it. The Wendigo had been slain. I had done it. My sister's killer was dead. Its body was burned, its heart in pieces and buried. Janessa, I cried out. I kept my promise and I took care of it. The Wendigo won't get anybody else. It won't kill anybody else. I placed my lowered head in my hands and I continued to cry. I'm sorry I wasn't braver before. I whimpered. I'm so sorry I wasn't stronger. I placed some flowers on my sister's grave an hour later. I talked to her tombstone as though she was there listening. I would like to believe that she was and that she was pleased with my accomplishment. Afterwards, I returned home and I slept through the day and all night. Once morning came, I heard some noise downstairs. I went down to see that my parents were home and sitting down to breakfast. They stopped and looked over at me, saying nothing. I walked over and I pulled up a seat. I had no appetite at all. How was your trip? Where'd you guys end up going? My parents exchanged looks before my father replied. We went out west to visit your aunt and uncle. Did you enjoy it? I had difficulty keeping my chin from quivering as I lowered my head again. Jeremy, sweetie, what's wrong? Both my mother and father got up and came over to me. Why do you keep leaving me all alone? God damn it, I'm the only kid that you have left. Do you even care about me? They hugged me tightly, offering apologies. I could have sworn that I felt another pair of hands on my shoulders. Their light touch was the most comforting of all. I really hoped that Janessa was proud of me. But a new task was ahead of me now. A harder one, perhaps. I was going to have to figure out how to reconcile with my parents. Our family had been broken long before her death. We'll never be whole again. But I know with some effort, we can be better than this. I hope that she can continue to give me the strength to put myself together as I progress into adulthood.